It's time for the best coverage of the top stories in sports. The Sports Wrap with Jason Page starts now.
Yes, it does on a Monday. A lot to talk about over the next 60 minutes. Kavitha Davidson will drop by, talk about Caitlin Clark being kept off the U.S. Olympic women's basketball team. Yankees-Dodgers had a hell of a series this weekend. I have some thoughts on that. Scottie Scheffler, another win on the PGA Tour. The French Open. Dennis Bernstein drops by to talk about the Stanley Cup Final in Game 2 on Monday night between the Oilers and Panthers. The Panthers up 1-0 in that series. But we started out with the big news of the day, developing news, as Dan Hurley, the head coach of the UConn Huskies, will stay as the head coach of the UConn Huskies. He turns down a reported 6-year, $70 million offer from the Los Angeles Lakers, opting to stay at UConn to try and win a third straight national championship. Wow. Now, I got to tell you, when this whole thing came up last week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we talked about it on the show. My take on it was he was using it to get a better deal from UConn. Now, it remains to be seen, and this will all develop and hash itself out over the next 24 hours, and we'll have more coverage of it on Tuesday, as this news broke late in our recording window on Monday. But Dan Hurley has decided to turn away the Lakers. And if not Dan Hurley, now what do you do if you're the Lakers? That becomes an interesting question that we could talk about as we go through the week. But Hurley turns down a reported 6-year, $70 million offer. And again, Adrian Wojnarowski over at ESPN was the first to report the news. So Dan Hurley stays at UConn. Now what do you do if you're the Lakers? Do you go back to J.J. Redick? Everybody's going to know that they were your second or third choice. You know, Borrego, who's another guy that was thought to be in consideration for the job. Somebody that Anthony Davis thought highly of. What are you thinking if you're LeBron James and you watch this? What are you thinking if you're LeBron James and you see that your organization, you're the head, I mean, you have the chance to coach one of the all-time greatest players in NBA history. Certainly a guy that's on the Mount Rushmore. And what happens? Decides not to go and take that job. I mean, it's remarkable if you think about it. They had the opportunity to go, the Hurley family, the Hurley clan. Dan Hurley had the opportunity to go coach LeBron James, future Hall of Famer, Anthony Davis, future Hall of Famer, Los Angeles Lakers franchise, one of the most famous in sports lore. And he chose to stay at the University of Connecticut. Be curious to see how UConn rewards him. Hopefully they do. And you have to imagine this isn't going to be the last time we have this conversation when it comes to Dan Hurley and potentially taking NBA coaching jobs. I don't care what UConn offers him. If the Celtics job ever comes open, he's going to think about it because it's in the Northeast. If it's the Knicks, he's going to think about it. He's in the Northeast. If it's the 76ers, he's going to think about it. He's a Northeast guy. And I wonder how much of this also had to do with the geography of wanting to stay on the East Coast. We'll have more on this on Tuesday's show. All right, NBA Finals. Game number 2 goes to the Celtics, as did Game 1. Celtics win it 105-98. They take a 2-0 series lead on the Dallas Mavericks. Look, I know this is kind of given this short shrift because we're only giving it half a segment, but because of the Hurley breaking news at the top of the show, we had to give it a little less. Here's the reality. Kyrie Irving's not giving this team enough. They're not shooting free throws well. They're getting beat to second balls. And those 3 things through the first 2 games have been the story to me. I mean, the Celtics won on Sunday night without really getting huge games from Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. So to me, at this point, I think you're talking about a Mavericks team that's in a lot of trouble going home for Game 3. And look, I picked them to win the series in 6. I thought this was Dallas's opportunity. I thought they could pick off the Celtics. But Boston is proving why they won so many games in the regular season, why they have steamrolled through the postseason, as kind of soft a road as it's been with all the superstars of every team they've faced being hurt. But, I mean, if Kyrie Irving does not show up, as he's failed to do in the first 2 games of this series, I mean, it might be over in 5. They can't win with what they're getting out of Kyrie Irving, who through the first 2 games, I think is 13 of like 35 or something like that. I mean, it's an awful number. And he can get up there in the post-game press conference and look as confident as he wants and smooth. And again, that's the mark of a guy that's already won a championship. That's a mark of a guy that's already got one. So I don't think he's going to be as broken up as a Luka or some of these other guys who this might be their only shot. You know, I know we like to think, oh, Luka and Kyrie and Jason Kidd, and they could keep putting pieces around. It's hard to get to the NBA Finals. Milwaukee won one a couple of years ago. They haven't sniffed one since. And we all thought, oh, you know, the era of Giannis Antetokounmpo, now they get Damian Lillard. Nothing. And again, to me, the biggest concern I would have if I'm Jason Kidd is the Celtics won the first 2 games, and they haven't gotten monster games yet from Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Remember, Game 1, Porzingis was huge in the first half. He was a non-factor in Game 2. Got hurt late in the game. See what his status winds up being for Game 3. Dallas is a 1.5-point favorite, we should note, for Game 3 of this series. You take them at your own peril right now, because if this is the Kyrie Irving we're getting for this NBA Finals, I really honestly think it could be a sweep. What a disaster that would be for the NBA. Your marquee showcase, the NBA Finals, which we all thought was going to be a good series. Sweep. Could be. We're coming back. Talk some Stanley Cup. Dennis Bernstein, thefourthperiod.com, and SiriusXM NHL Radio. Next.
Over 13 million Americans were affected by identity theft in 2022, and the threats go way beyond just credit card fraud. Today's identity thieves can use your information in ways that are easy to miss by just monitoring accounts and credit, like opening loans, transferring home titles, even committing crimes.
Someone got my social security number, made a driver's license, and was used for criminal activity.
You can do so much with a social security number that I didn't know could happen.
They drained my bank account. It was terrifying.
You're even more vulnerable than you realize. Your information is exposed through online shopping, banking, even corporate data breaches. No wonder there's a new victim of identity theft every 3 seconds. Only LifeLock alerts you to the widest volume of threats all in one place, like someone trying to use your social security number, open a new loan in your name, or even commit a crime in your name.
There was a big yes button and there was a big no button. I clicked, that's not me, and LifeLock took it from there.
If you become a victim of identity theft, a dedicated U.S.-based restoration specialist will be assigned to your case and work to fix the issue on your behalf.
If something happens, you have somebody fighting for you.
All LifeLock members are backed by the LifeLock $1 Million Protection Package, including reimbursement for stolen funds, personal expenses, and coverage for lawyers and experts up to $1 million. It can be dangerously easy to steal your identity. With LifeLock, it's easy to help protect yourself.
I will be with LifeLock forever.
Join the millions of people already protected by LifeLock. And for a limited time, save 25% on your first year with promo code 25TV. All plans include a 60-day money-back guarantee. Call 800-710-7531 or visit lifelock.com/25TV to save 25% on your first year of identity theft protection. Enroll now.
Attention families with a loved one in a nursing home. If your loved one has suffered from bed sores, falls, broken bones, dehydration, or even death, you may be entitled to a substantial settlement. If you have a loved one who is injured in a nursing home, we will find out what happened. State violations are found against nursing homes every day. You have a limited time to file your claim, so don't wait. Call 800-398-5999 and speak with one of our attorneys. The call is confidential and free.
All right, we go from the madness of the NBA over to the NHL. Stanley Cup Final. Game 1 goes to the Florida Panthers. Game 2 on Monday night. Panthers shut out the Oilers, but is it sustainable? Dennis Bernstein of the fourthperiod.com and SiriusXM NHL Radio stops by the show to talk with us. I don't view that what the Panthers did in Game 1 as being sustainable when you get outshot, 32-18, and Bobrovsky basically stands on his head. Yes, if you're the Oilers, you have to be disappointed you dropped Game 1, but they have to feel like if they put that kind of pressure on, they will be in this series.
You're absolutely right, JP. You're not mad at the Oilers based on that effort. You're talking about an elite performance by Sergei Bobrovsky, right? And a performance that now puts him at the head of the list for the Conn Smythe that the Florida Panthers win. So that's what. So I thought that the Panthers would come out hard and fast and be aggressive, and they weren't. I think the first 10 minutes it was like 11-3 shots on goal for the Oilers. Like the only thing the Oilers didn't do was score. And if you give them, I think it was 10 high danger chances, 5-on-5 in the first 2 periods. If they do that again tonight, they're gonna lose the Panthers. So the Edmonton Oilers can't be mad about Game 1, and the Panthers have to play better. The first half of the game has to be better. They have to really, really force the tempo, and try to impose their will, because they didn't do that. They got away with one, I think. They were clutch about it, but I don't know, a couple of lineup changes for Chris Knoblauch, putting CeCe and Nurse back together after they had won 3 straight, putting Warren Fogle back in. I think that was a rookie mistake, to be honest with you. CeCe and Nurse. Now, the first goal, everybody says that CeCe and Nurse were on the goal, on the ice for the first 2 goals. The first goal, there was lazy back-checking by Connor McDavid and Zach Hyman, too. But the second goal can't happen. It just can't happen. It was poor defensive play, so I'm eager to see that. But, yeah, I picked the Oilers in 6, and I think they got a legitimate chance tonight to even the series.
If you had told me that there would be that many penalties in that game against the Panthers, I would have said no way the Oilers lose, because I thought the power play was going to be obviously their opportunity, and one of the weak points for this Florida team is the penalty trouble that they could find themselves in, and certainly the Rangers couldn't capitalize on that, but you think the Oilers would.
You think they would, but and I know that the Oilers have killed 30 straight penalties or something like that. It's kind of mind-blowing that team would be the best penalty killing team, but people forget the second best penalty killing team in the playoffs, the Florida Panthers. And, I knew it. Like Sam Bennett took a bad interference penalty. Like, there's Sam Bennett's bad penalty that I predicted would happen every game. But they played great. They didn't really get many high danger chances on the power play. But you can't tempt fate. You can't keep doing that throughout the series, because at some point in time, Leon's one-time or Connor's great move or Zach at the net, you're going to pay the price for that. So I think that Paul Maurice wants his team to tone that down, but that's in their DNA. The Panthers love to take penalties. As much as they love to hit people and be aggressive on the forecheck, they also love to take penalties. They really have to walk the line, I think, for the rest of the series, or else they're really asking for it.
Dennis, I felt like Game 2 in the NBA Finals last night was a must-win for Dallas, because I don't think they can win 4 out of the next 5 against this Celtics team that has been a juggernaut all year. Is Game 2 tonight a must-win for the Edmonton Oilers?
Depends what cliche you believe in, Jason. If it's, it's not a series till, the home team loses a game, then maybe. But I don't know. I think the Oilers can go home down 0-2 and still win 2 and come back in Florida and win Game 5. So I don't think there's any panic here because of the way they played, Jason. Again, Edmonton played great in Game 1. So must win, maybe can't lose, not must win. You know what a must win is? When you get eliminated and they raise the other team raises the cup. So I don't think must win because I think it's more about how you play. And again, if they can replicate that effort, and let's say they don't win and Bobrovsky puts up another great performance, then you go back to Edmonton and say, okay, we got to get to the crowd's going to be crazy in Edmonton. So I wouldn't say must win. I'd say more like a can't lose.
Oilers have only lost by multiple goals in this postseason, I think once in this postseason prior to what took place in game one. And you don't get the sense that this Oilers team is going to be lacking for any confidence coming off that game. I didn't get that sense listening to the post game. What did you hear on the off day that might have piqued your curiosity?
Yeah, it's like the intimidation factor. Like Leon Draisaitl said it before the series started. Like, we're not going to be intimidated by physicality or what. Now, I'll say this. This is the most physical team they've played, the Oilers. Right. So they got a little bit of a break with Vancouver and Dallas. Those aren't physical teams. But no, I think they're a supremely confident team. And I look, to me, the best takeaway of the entire playoffs was when they asked experience to Chris Novak. And he said, well, how did experience do for the Buffalo Bills in the Super Bowl? Didn't really work out for them as well. So I think they're a confident team. We have Connor and Leon and Zach Hyman scoring goals. I think that the lack of confidence would be the defensive guys that we talked about, maybe Stuart Skinner, but I don't sense any concern or anything like that because of, again, how great they played in game one. And they really put a great effort in a building where you wouldn't think, you would think they would take their time to get into the game. I remember both teams had a week off. So for the Oilers to play that way after a week off with really no rust, you got to be confident coming into game two. And I don't think there's an intimidation factor because this team's been through a lot of naysayers. A lot of people said they'd never get this far, Jason. So I don't see that from the Oilers at all.
I'm working a little backwards here because normally I would say set the scene for me to start a conversation, but sort of set the scene for what the vibe is like down there in South Florida right now around this Panthers team. Is it people walking around in South Florida of all places with hockey jerseys on? Try and give me a feel for what it's like.
Okay, so I'll give you. I'm glad you asked that. Yesterday, I went to the Marlins game. They played the Guardians, and they announced 12,000, but it was really probably around 10. The biggest cheer, and the Marlins hit a couple home runs. The biggest cheer in the building yesterday, Jason. They showed a kid wearing a Panthers jersey. That was the biggest cheer. So it's a thing. It is. And Jason, you and I both know it's not the greatest sports market in the world.
No.
But the crowd is great. Jason, you and I remember, like 5-6 years ago, they had 6,000 people at the game. And people was like, wow, look at all the empty seats. It's changed. I mean, Mike McDaniel showed up and banged the drum before the game, and somebody made a joke. He has one postseason victory in hockey and none in the NFL. So it's a thing that people are gravitating towards. Now, don't ever say they're playing in South Beach, Jason, because they get really angry. It's Broward County. It's Sunrise. We're not in South Beach playing, but it's become a very popular team, legitimate sellouts. I think the get-in price for game one was about $800. So
the get-in-the-door price? The get-in-the-door price was $800?
Yeah. They released some tickets late. I think it was maybe $300 or $400. But if you went on the secondary market, it was $800 for the Panthers. Now, maybe there's a lot of people from Edmonton buying those tickets, and there's a good amount of people that traveled down. But it's people are rallying around this team in South Florida for sure.
Dennis, enjoy game two. We'll talk soon, my friend.
Thanks, Jay. Always appreciate the time.
We're coming back. We roll along on this Monday edition of the show. Let's talk about Caitlin Clark. I want to bring in Kavitha Davidson, friend of the show. Author, sports journalist. Loving Sports When They Don't Love You Back is her book. We didn't even need 3 takes for me to get that right. She hangs out with us on the program today for a couple of segments, in fact. I want to talk about the Caitlin Clark Olympic stuff. And you know what's kind of... I am just shocked. And maybe I shouldn't be. Maybe I'm being a tad bit naive in all of this. At just how divisive a figure, by no fault of her own. We've seen plenty of divisive figures in sports, and usually they've got something to do with it. This woman's just out there playing basketball, and all the noise around her, I don't know how she's blocking it all out right now. I really don't.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. And honestly, having been following this and asked to talk about it for a couple of months now. I'm a little over it. And again, I'm not over Caitlin Clark. None of this is her fault. I think a lot of it in the last couple of weeks especially has been fueled by uninformed takes by media that have just not been in these rooms and have not covered these athletes and also have to do things for clickbait and all of that. But this Olympics reaction, I think, is largely being, now there are a couple of media members that I can call out, but I think this is largely being fueled by
Please call them out. Call them out. Let's go.
I think that right now, this swell of divisiveness is being fueled by her fans, by very well-meaning, I suppose, but very
not
casual
all of them.
WNBA fans.
There are people who are not well-meaning in this, and all you got to do is scour X. And frankly, you don't even have to scour it. They'll come to you because for some reason, Twitter and X thinks I love conservatives because all I've got are conservatives on Twitter saying Black Brittany Griner, who didn't stand for the national anthems on the Olympic team, and Caitlin Clark isn't.
Okay, yes. Well, I'm putting all of that part of it aside because that is obviously ridiculous. The idea that Nikki Haley suddenly wants to weigh in on the USA women's national team is also ridiculous. I mean, people who I think genuinely love Caitlin Clark and want to see her in the Olympics, but they are such casual fans and they are so new to this game that they think that being selected to an Olympic roster is a popularity contest, and it just isn't.
I agree. I'm completely on the same page with you on it. But here we find ourselves in this situation where she is becoming so divisive, and it's becoming now a political issue on top of the sports issue, which is already crazy. And I talked about this. I wrote a column for NBC News, MSNBC, all that stuff last week. And I talked about the fact that I think a big part of the problem here is that male sports writers who have not covered women's sports from anything below 30,000 feet and have always covered team sports. I'm not talking about individual sports because that's a different dynamic, but team sports below 30,000 feet, I don't think they know how to cover this story. I honestly think this is an issue of complete, not willful ignorance, just ignorance in general towards how the women's sports dynamic is so much different from the men's. And so they're going to the lowest common denominator of jealousy and resentment, and this person doesn't like her or that person doesn't like her. Am I reading it wrong?
No, they are going to that lowest common denominator, but that is how they cover the men. So, it comes down to, like I said, the clickbaity things and all of that. Look, I think that people, again, don't understand how an Olympic roster is chosen. And so to explain that to people, there's a selection committee that includes coaches and executives. And I said this on NBC this morning, the head of league operations for the WNBA is part of the selection committee. And if anybody has a stated interest in growing viewership through roster building, she might be that person, and she is on the committee that did not select Caitlin Clark to this team. Look, there are 12 slots. 9 of the 12 women who were selected to this team have previous Olympic experience. What are we even talking about here, right? She will be on the 2028 squad in LA. It's going to be a frenzy when she's on the team. But she's just not ready. And there was some reporting that I think was maybe framed improperly, if you ask me, but the reporting said, Christine Brennan at USA Today said that 2 people that she had talked to they said that there was concern that Caitlin Clark's fans would be upset if she had limited playing time had she been on the roster. So what are we actually talking about here? She is, frankly, not good enough to have starting minutes on the USA team, given how small the squad is and how stacked the squad is. That's just the reality. She will get there. She is not there right now. So either you take up a spot by putting her on there as a publicity stunt and people will be upset, or you leave her off, or you take up a spot by putting her on there as a publicity stunt and then you don't play her enough because you still want to win a gold medal, or you leave her off the squad, which is what they did, and I think seems to have been the right decision. There are plenty of other women that we can point to who probably should have made the squad, and we can have that conversation too.
I got about a minute and a half here. It almost feels like we're in a situation now where she can't you almost wonder if we've hit a point where there could be any positive outcomes short of her winning titles and winning MVPs. And at the end of the year, she's going to win Rookie of the Year and all of that. But it just feels like every story right now is at a polar extreme. Like there's just, it almost feels like very little of what she does is about the basketball. Even the basketball is taken to, well, she leads the league in turnovers. And, you know, there's always something right now that's of a negative nature in this story.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just the nature of discourse online in general, regardless.
It's so depressing. It's so depressing.
It's just a polar or push thing on all sides. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. The turnover thing, you should point out, though, that she does have that many turnovers.
Yeah.
Nikki Haley is sitting here cherry picking assists, you know, as if Nikki Haley has been a stat guru for the WNBA for years now. I don't know what's going on.
I agree. We're hanging out with Kavitha Davidson. She's gonna actually come back in a few minutes, and we're gonna talk to her about the Yankees-Dodgers series because she was in the belly of the beast in New York this weekend for what had to be a wild atmosphere at Yankee Stadium. It certainly played that way on television. That was a World Series-like atmosphere for regular season baseball. So I'm going to bring her back in a little bit and talk to her about what happened between the Yankees and Dodgers this weekend and how I think it could be very important for baseball going forward. We'll get to the French Open and Scottie Scheffler's win at the Memorial as well. Sports Wrap continues. Don't go anywhere. Sports Wrap continues. Good to have you with us on this Monday. Jamming in a lot into this hour today, as we do every day. Sammy Arnell will be back with us tomorrow. Something to consider coming up in 10 minutes with a special guest, Kavitha Davidson, sports journalist and author. Get her thoughts on Yankees-Dodgers. And I got a thought on Yankees-Dodgers from the weekend that was. I think what we saw this weekend in the Bronx was very consequential for Major League Baseball. We'll talk about that coming up. But we move things over to the world of tennis and golf. Tennis, anyone? Iga Swiatek was a winner this weekend. Swiatek. I should be able to say it correctly. I am half Polish. Wow. I mean, her fifth. People don't realize very quickly that Iga Swiatek has won now 5 Grand Slams. 4 of them, the French Open. She is the women's equivalent of Rafa Nadal when it comes to clay. She won now in 20, 22, 23, and 24 after her latest conquest of Paolini this weekend. So kudos to Iga Swiatek, who wins at the French Open at Roland Garros. But the big headline for me, it's got to be Carlos Alcaraz, who just continues his ascension through the sport. I mean, there's no getting around it. 5-set, how about back-to-back 5-set thrillers for Alcaraz? First beating Jannik Sinner on Friday. Matter of fact, I was watching it as we were doing the show in between breaks. Thrilling 5-set match. Now, you can argue that if Sinner had more lead time where he was playing going into the French Open, he was dealing with a hip injury. If he had been playing more, you could argue Jannik Sinner probably wins that match. But as it may be, he was dealing with cramping in that match, hand cramping. As it would be, Carlos Alcaraz beats him in 5 sets, then goes on to beat Andre Zverev in the final, also in 5 sets. And you just get the sense, it's so amazing how tennis, how these things could be so cyclical sometimes, because you watch Zverev and Medvedev, you watch these guys that are really good tennis players. You know, it's almost like the baseball equivalent of there being AAA and then quadruple A. Guys are really good and then just can't get over the hump. The tennis equivalent of that are these guys like Zverev, who just won the event coming into the French on clay. And guys like Daniel Medvedev, who wins tons of events and makes tons of prize money, but can't win a Grand Slam. That's sort of where we are with tennis. It's Sinner and Alcaraz, and it feels like there's a lot of guys kind of right on the door, but they don't have the key to get in. They can't bust through it. So congratulations, Carlos Alcaraz, his third Grand Slam. Sinner will be back. And the story of this tournament also, I think it has to be mentioned, is what transpired with Rafa Nadal. Did we see him for the final time at Roland Garros? That remains to be seen. And obviously the medial meniscus injury for Novak Djokovic. And I was actually texting with our friend Patrick McEnroe, who's frequently a guest on the show. And what did he say? He said he wouldn't be shocked if Djokovic makes it back for Wimbledon. And when we were talking about that injury late last week, I didn't think it was possible he'd make it back for Wimbledon. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see what happens there. Tennis to golf. Scottie Scheffler. He's got 5 wins, and we're not even at the U.S. Open yet. We will be in a few days. But Scottie Scheffler wins again. And he's one of only 4 players now to have 5 wins in a PGA Tour season before we get to the U.S. Open. Johnny Miller was one. Tiger Woods was one. I can't remember who the other one is off the top of my head. But Scottie Scheffler outlasts Colin Morikawa en route to a victory by 1 shot in what was one of the tougher tests that you will see in a non-major on the PGA Tour. The Memorial, Jack Nicklaus's event out there in Ohio. And he got the ceremonial handshake that you get from Jack Nicklaus when you win at the end of this tournament. Congratulations to Scottie Scheffler. What a hell of an event. As he goes on to win with his wife and newborn in the crowd for the first time. It's got to be an amazing range of emotions. This was the chip he hit right before that was the penultimate shot of the tournament for him. And then he had to make this putt, which was no gimme, coming back down the hill for par to win. And Sunday at the Memorial, par was a good story. Look at the crowds, by the way. I'm so glad we have this shot up. Look at the crowds at Memorial for that victory for Scottie Scheffler. Can we go back? Can we get a wide shot? Look at those crowds. I'm going to pause it right there. Look at those crowds. Live Golf this week was in Houston, home of the old Shell Houston Open. Live Golf was in Houston. I want you to go and try and find some screenshots of what the crowds were like in Houston. You don't hear Live Golf guy talking all that ish right now about the PGA Tour. This was a great weekend for the PGA. We're coming back with something to consider next. Coming up in 10 minutes, we'll wrap it up with some odds and ends. By the way, for those wondering where Sam Yarnell is, he is off today. He will return tomorrow. But first, something to consider. And a special guest for something to consider today. Kavitha Davidson is hanging out with us on the program today for a couple of segments. We are grateful. She is a sports journalist. She is an author. The book, Loving Sports When They Don't Love You Back, available in bookstores and all that good stuff. And Kavitha hangs out with us on the program. So, something to consider, Kavitha Davidson. I don't have the official ratings in yet, but I am willing to bet that particularly the Saturday and Sunday games and not the Apple TV game and all that goofy stuff that went on Friday. And I know they showed it in the local markets and all that, but I am willing to bet Yankees-Dodgers on Saturday and Sunday probably did a pretty close to a record number for a regular season baseball game numbers we don't typically see. And I would also venture to say that if we get a Yankees-Dodgers World Series, it's probably going to be close to 30 million viewers on average. I think it's going to be a monster number. I think it can be a TV game saver, game changer for baseball in an era where World Series ratings are declining. I've watched both of these teams throughout the year. I live on the West Coast, so I get plenty of Dodgers, and I'm a Yankees fan, so I have the MLB package, so I'm always watching the Yankees. And they're always usually on at different times, so I can watch both. I mean, it's hard to argue that this would not be an enthralling couple of weeks if we were to get these two teams in the World Series.
Yeah, I mean, 30 million is a huge number. I think we've been at like 9 or 10 in the last few years. It will be a huge number if the Yankees and Dodgers are in the World Series. That's just kind of a no-brainer. It's no secret that the league loves it when big market teams are in the World Series. It is just better for the bottom line. But in this case, it's not just about the big markets, which is obviously a huge thing. There's 80 years of storylines between these two teams in the World Series. You still don't have any agreement on whether Jackie was safe at the plate. But on top of that, you really do. And we noticed, we saw this firsthand as Yankee fans in the early to mid 2000s. Japanese fans travel, man, and they watch these games. And now you have these superstars, these Japanese superstars on the Dodgers. And they helped invade Yankee Stadium this weekend. Like, it was a little bit wild how many. Now, I have never seen this many Dodgers fans in LA, let alone in New York. But the Japanese fans absolutely traveled strong. And I remember in 2003 when Hideki Matsui was on the Yankees, and you get on the train up to the Bronx, and there would be a subway car that was just filled with Japanese fans. And that's a little bit of the energy that you saw this time around. So yeah, I mean, it would be gangbusters for MLB if the Yankees and the Dodgers were in the World Series.
Look, the Yankees-Dodgers 1980 World Series did 42 million fans. I get it. It was a different time. There were like 30 channels, and right. Now there's a zillion of them. I get it, which is why I think that 25 to 30 million would be an enormous number in this day and age. But I think those two markets, and the reason I think you'd get the middle of the country is the stars on both sides, Ohtani and Judge, are the sorts of figures that I think people would tune in to watch. And I have to say, honestly, the Dodgers may have won 2 of 3 this weekend. Aaron Judge was better than Shohei Ohtani this weekend. There's no getting around it.
Yeah, I mean, Aaron Judge is having just a ridiculous. He started out so slow. That's what's amazing about his numbers. Slow. Yankee fans were booing because we're rational human beings. He honestly, I can't remember exactly the date of his first career ejection, but the numbers from his first career ejection, which was early in May, have been ridiculous. And then he's just carried that completely over into this first week of June. I mean, there are so many storylines here. The star power is off the charts. And this was like this. You're right. The Yankees dropped 2 of these 3 games. The Dodgers are such a good team.
Yeah, they are.
We have to remind ourselves that Juan Soto was not in the lineup this weekend. And the Yankees have been doing all of this without Garrett Cole, the reigning Cy Young Award winner, throwing a single major league pitch. So it is June. There are 90-something games left in this season.
It's flying, though. It's flying by. I mean, it's flying by.
It is flying.
People are going to wake up. People are going to come out of the Stanley Cup and NBA Finals and turn around, and the Yankees are going to be like 50-23, and they're going to be like, what is going on here?
It's all gravy, honestly, at this point until Garrett Cole comes out. But on the Dodgers side of things, this is probably the most exciting team in the West. They in the National League. They I think have the biggest odds to represent the National League in the World Series, but they're not leading baseball in record right now. The Phillies have the best record.
I was going to say there's a Philadelphia Phillies fan on line 1 for you.
and that's what's happening.
They're yelling. Hold on, Phillies fan on line 1. What was that?
Damn you!
There you go. So. Yeah, Phillies fans aren't having it.
And you know what? The Phillies fans, I had some friends in London for Mets Phillies, and I was getting reporting from them on the ground. And one friend in particular who's neither a Mets nor a Phillies fan, so she's agnostic. But she basically said the Phillies fans have shown out, and there are maybe 2 or 3 Mets fans for every Philly. Like it was a wild turnout there.
I gotta imagine, and we only got a couple seconds here. This has been a rough year for Mets fans. I mean, I'm not out there on the East Coast, so I don't have to hear like the sports radio and, you know, the hot take world that we live in WFAN land and stuff like that. But man, it's been a rough year for the Mets. It's been really rough. It's been rough.
It's been a little bit somber. I think the frustration, it feels like old Mets fans, which is really sad because they now have new ownership, but they had all kinds of promises going into these next couple of years.
The name of the book is Loving Sports When They Don't Love You Back. That's Kavitha Davidson. Thanks for hanging out for a couple of segments today. I'll see you soon.
Yeah, thanks, Jason.
All right, just about time to put the wraps on this baby for a Monday. A couple of announcements. One, if you have not yet subscribed to the Sports Wrap with Jason Page podcast, go and do that now. Maybe the show isn't available every single day on TV in your area. Maybe it's not on at all in your area. In that case, you're already watching me on the podcast or listening to the podcast. You can watch the podcast or you can listen to the podcast. It's available through Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, anywhere you get your podcasts. It can't be easier. Sports Wrap with Jason Page. Go and subscribe and share it with a friend. That's the first thing. The second thing, last night, totally spontaneously, I decided to turn on my live Twitter thing, and we did a Twitter live event during the NBA Finals, which was also going on at the same time as that Yankees Dodgers game that was going on in the Bronx last night. And we just opened it up. You could ask questions. Just no plan. We were just having a conversation. It was available on X, formerly known as Twitter. We are going to do this again in a much more organized way on Wednesday night. So if you are a fan of Sports Wrap, I would tell you, go over to X now. Follow me there at the back page. Again, on X, at the back page. Wednesday night, we will be doing a special NBA Finals edition, live edition of Sports Wrap. We'll have guests, conversation. We'll take questions. There'll be a live chat box if you want to take part in the show. It's going to be a much more interactive version of Sports Wrap. We will do it Wednesday night, and we're going to try these intermittently and see if you guys are into it, and it'll be something fun and different to do. All right, without any further delay, time for some odds and ends. Odds and ends. NASCAR yesterday. Kyle Larson makes a pass with about 9 laps to go. He passes Martin Truex Jr., who actually ran out of gas at the end of this race, which I want to talk about in a second. Kyle Larson, your winner at the Sonoma 250 or 350, whatever it's called. We previewed the race on Friday. I actually picked Martin Truex Jr. to win the race. And not only did he not win, but he ran out of gas right in front of the start-finish line. Kyle Larson just continues to have an amazing season. Last week he found out he'd be available for the playoffs as he missed the Coke 600, the Coca-Cola 600, but NASCAR officials gave him a waiver for the playoffs, so he will be taking part in that. Congratulations to Kyle Larson, your winner again yesterday at Sonoma in a road race that had a lot more crashes than you typically see in that road race. It tied for the most cautions ever in that race. Be that as it may. Joey Logano was actually the pole sitter. He got into a wreck early, was never really able to recover. So Joey Logano came up short there. But a win for Kyle Larson again as this magical season of his continues. NFL news, odds and ends, the end of a career for one NFL tight end. Darren Waller calling it a career on Monday morning. This was something that had been long anticipated. There had been talk throughout this entire offseason that Darren Waller was going to retire. And look, I don't have any problem with him waiting until June 10th to make a decision. Most times, you only get one shot to retire, unless you're Tom Brady or Rob Gronkowski or any of these other players that retire and then come back and play. He wanted to make sure that he was ready to retire. I don't have a problem with that at all. So Darren Waller, congratulations on a nice NFL career. Probably could have been. He's one of those guys, though, that I will say I think could have been a lot better than his numbers actually were. And again, some of that is circumstance. He played with the Raiders. Then you go and finish out your career with Daniel Jones and the Giants. Think what you want of of Daniel Jones. So, Darren Waller, congratulations, calling it a career at a relatively young age. Hey Google, how old is Darren Waller? Let's see if we can find out.
46 years old.
No, they got... See, the one time I asked Google a question on camera, and it all gets screwed up. Odds and ends, the end of one thing is the beginning of another. Darvin Ham fired as head coach of the Los Angeles Lakers, which is why we were waiting on all this news concerning Dan Hurley, which, by the way, we will have full coverage of the Lakers Dan Hurley saga on Tuesday's show. Darvin Ham has a new job, though. Not out of work for very long. He will be an assistant coach on Doc Rivers' staff in Milwaukee with the Bucks. Congratulations, Darvin Ham. Not out of work for very long. And now here's what happens. All of these guys eventually get recycled. You go and coach in Milwaukee, Doc Rivers' team. You go and stay on that staff, and if they're successful, eventually you'll get some of the credit for that. Doc will talk him up to other teams, and Darvin Ham will likely get another shot as a head coach in the NBA. Very few guys only get one bite of the apple as it relates to being a head coach in the NBA. So I think Darvin Ham will surely get another opportunity at some point down the line. But for now, assistant coach over in Milwaukee with the Bucks as they try to get that thing figured out. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this Monday edition of Sports Wrap. Thank you to our guests, Dennis Bernstein, for dropping by. Also, Kavitha Davidson. Love talking to her. We'll be back with you on Tuesday. Sam Yarnell will return to the show as well. We'll catch you then.